Hi, good evening. My name is Eric Moore. This is the Town Meeting Study Committee, Concord. This is February 25th. And it's just 7 o'clock, and so I'm going to call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone. Phil Swain is going to clerk tonight. Thank you, Phil. I'll go through and take the roll as customary. Keith Bergman, good evening. Keith, would you just say hello?
Present, thank you.
Katie Brosnick, I'm not expecting this evening. Kristen Haggerty, please.
Here.
Alice Kaufman, I don't see her. I'll make a note of that. Eric Moore, present. Parashar Patel, please.
Here.
Thank you. Phil Swain, please.
Here.
Chase Thompson, I don't see Chase online, he may join later. And Eric Van Loon, please. Here. So what is that? We have a quorum? Yeah, we do. We're six. Good. Six. Always a worry. Okay, moving along. So typical agenda, public comment, if so desired. I'm not sure if we'll actually approve any minutes tonight. Updates in terms of what we're all doing individually, and I'll talk a bit about the timeline. Big item tonight, talking about guiding principles, is sort of stimulated from Kristen. And I think to talk about the hearings, what the best practice, what the current practice, and any recommendations we might make for the pre-town meeting hearings. And we'll also talk about deliberation and meeting days and meeting locations. I don't see, well, I see one member of the public. Any comments or questions from the public at this stage? Seeing none, moving forward, thank you. Again, no minutes to approve tonight. Still trying to close the loop with Chase, and my minutes from the 11th are outstanding. So updates. So it's the spring. It feels like spring today, so it's now the springtime. So one thing that's coming up is a select board meeting on the 3rd. They're going to go through the warrant order, and Carmen, you may elaborate on this, but one of the things that's going to be discussed is that at town meeting in June, the select board will be the mover of a motion to use clickers at town meeting 25 as a rule of the meeting. That's a procedural choice by the moderator to use a motion that way. Motions are typically made either rules of the meeting are typically made by the select board or secondarily by the finance committee. But the moderator, as I learned, doesn't make those motions. We could expect that there'll be some debate about the use of clickers at meeting and in June. And so I'm preparing, we can discuss this maybe not tonight, but in a later meeting. I'm preparing to make a statement from our committee as to why we chose to use clickers, or why we support, why does it we recommend using clickers at meeting, the two motions that we've made. And I'm not sure what else is happening in the meeting the 3rd, but that's coming.
So Eric, one thing you should know is that it's not just a select board that can move for a rule of the meeting.
Sure,
Anybody
of course.
can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, typically, just to clarify, I'm sorry. That's correct. In this particular case, the moderator will ask the select board to move this particular motion. So that's what we're discussing at this meeting.
I know.
You're right. And
If the select board doesn't do it, or they don't do what we want them to, we can do it too.
Sure, that's true. Fair enough. Good point.
Or
Thank you.
we or anybody else in the meeting.
Thank you. Meeting on the 10th, citizen petitions to talk about. I don't think there's a lot to recommend there, but I think they're important to understand, and maybe we'll review some of the collateral that we have for that. We haven't talked about amendments at town meeting at all, so I'd like just to sort of talk about those a bit. I don't know what we can or cannot recommend there, but I'll say that in my experience at town meeting, when they come up, I always go, ah. So I'd like to understand this a bit better before we move on. And hopefully, I have to check in with Chase, but hopefully you can spend some time talking about engagement. I think the big recommendation sort of activity.
Actually, can I just go back to that?
Yeah.
Technically, when does our charter expire?
With the end of town meeting, I
The
believe.
end of town meeting, okay, so
Yeah.
during town meeting, if we have to. You can convene, we can discuss and debate, and then come back out.
Oh, interesting.
With like a recommendation,
Sorry,
with, you mean if we had a
Yeah.
response or
we'll
recommendation?
post a pro forma agenda ahead of time,
Oh,
that basically lets us meet. Whatever necessary during town meeting,
well,
to
interesting.
discuss and debate and blah, blah, blah.
Cool, thank you.
Typically up in the library. Right.
Well, yes and no, we got yelled at the finance committee because we went into a room behind. Where everybody was sitting, because it's gotta be out in the open supposedly. Anybody could have walked in, the door was not closed, but we got, I got my hand slapped.
Yeah. Cool.
So somewhere,
So in the meeting of the 10th, Chase Thompson, Chase Thompson has joined. Welcome, Chase.
Sorry, hang
Yeah,
on, Zoom.
glad you're here. And the other thing in the 10th, and I haven't thought through how we're gonna do this, is to talk about prioritizing the different changes that we've recommended in terms of relevant benefits. What's the biggest, what are the most beneficial things we've talked about so far? Keith, I'll recognize you, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. As we go through this timeline and, where the select board's going to determine the order in which the articles appear, we're going to talk about handling citizen petitions. I'm just curious, because it's not public information, the warrant closed on February 19th. How many articles are there? And how many citizen petitions? Thanks.
Looks like Armin knows.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah. Carmen, please?
Hi, there are, can you hear me okay?
Yes, very
Yes.
well, thank
Okay.
you.
There are, I think there's roughly 60 articles. Actually, it's less because there were a couple of duplicates. It's somewhere around 57 articles. There are, I believe, 6 citizen petitions. 2 of them are zoning bylaw petitions. One is to ban rat poison. One is for ranked choice voting, home rule legislation. And I'm not remembering the others at the moment. Shannon, perhaps you can help out there. But it's going to be a very full warrant, and I think we've already given up on confining the warrant to 4 pages in the bridge and figuring we're going to have to go to 8.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
Maybe that means larger print,
Yeah, right.
be easier to read.
Yeah. So, I will have a draft of the committee report, at least in terms of what I can provide, in time for a meeting on the 10th. So I think, we'll have a chance to look at that and sort of orient ourselves a bit for the report work as well. I think on the 10th as well, we'll decide if we need a meeting on the 25th. So the select board schedule has changed a bit, and so we were going to meet on the 25th. That meeting is now, on Monday, the 24th. That meeting will now be on Monday, the 31st. And again, after, in the course of a meeting on the 10th, we'll discuss as a committee whether or not we want to meet on the 25th. That's an if needed meeting. And then my vision, quote unquote, is that, the meetings, the 31st and April 7th, and in April as well, all focused on what we need to do for the report. In terms of what do we have, what do we think about what we have, are there decisions or recommendations that we need to make in the course of getting the report out. I just want to highlight some of the public hearing dates, which are all in April, basically. Well, there's one in May, on May 1st, but the planning board public hearing on the 9th. The next night, the finance committee hearing, the meeting on the 14th, this is select board, and I believe that we'll actually be presenting our article as at the select board public hearing. That would be my assumption. So we'll need to sort out how to do that, but we don't need to do that tonight. Finance committee,
Could I just clarify, going back, and I apologize, I understand that the meeting is if needed, but would that be on the 24th or the 25th?
It would be on the 25th because the select board has their room on the 24th. Is that right? Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, so public hearings, I think, I'm gonna try to get to these, I learned something, yeah. And so we talked last meeting about report writing tasks, as it were. I'm actually not 100% on what you should be writing right now. I'll know more in the next 3 to 4 days, but just to recap, this is what we've talked about. This wasn't in the packet, but it'll be in the minutes, and I just wanted to show it for everyone. My hope is that we can have drafts from everyone by the 31st of March. One question that we'll come back to is, do we want a section for individual views? The town meeting 96, town meeting study committee 96, individuals have their own sections, and if we find that makes sense for folks, I'm happy to look at that as part of what we do.
Someone writes my own, I do one that.
But we could also do it where the person writing that section just acknowledges the views.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
You know, one member says what
Yeah.
this person says.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more important to, you know, capture the consensus. And then if there's a different point that was discussed, maybe capture that in there.
Yeah.
We also consider this or something like that.
Yeah, good.
I
The
agree
problem,
with Kristen.
good, very good. Yeah, the problem I'm trying to solve is making sure that everyone's voice is heard as they. Yeah. So moving forward, so, okay, first agenda item to really discuss. Kristen, do you want to talk about the guiding principles?
Yes. And thank you for, you know, Eric I had some ideas and then Eric kind of finessed them a little bit, to hopefully make them more, user friendly. And so what I was hoping is, you know, we had been discussing a lot about kind of the customer experience and, you know, streamlining and making things better, but I wanted to make sure we didn't get too far off track of what like the purpose of town meeting was in when we made recommendations. So kind of the guiding principles was like my way of saying, what do we want to preserve, right? You know, in other words, if we make a recommendation, we're like, that's a great recommendation. We're like, but wait, that's no longer town meeting or something. So what is it about town meeting that, you know, is that kind of the heart of town meeting that we should stay? And Carmen suggested using the term guiding principles. So kind of this, you know, there was a shot that I put together and then Eric, and it was really just a kind of a first draft, and Eric, you really kind of finessed it a bit. So I'm hoping that we discuss, you know, what we agree might be kind of the core things, and, you know, get input from the public who's on as well. And Alice, I see Alice on too.
Yeah, Ellis Kaufman is joining, so.
And that way, as we're making recommendations, we can come back and say, well, we said we wanted town meeting to be, you know, practical, you know, is this recommendation, you know, still kind of keeping in the spirit of, you know, what we're trying to do. That was kind of my hope, is that we all, based on what we've heard, based on our own experiences, and then, you know, what we hear from the public in the survey, if we can kind of capture it in a fairly succinct way.
Mhm. Good, thank you. Yeah, so the write-ups in the packet, you know, what Kristen wrote and the additional stuff. So I really hope we all read it. I think, you know, I attended a couple of talks about town meeting over the past few days, and one was led, a prominent participant in both of them was the moderator from North Andover, whose name was just blanked on.
So, Or
just completely
Mark
blanked.
DeSalvo.
Mark DeSalvo, yeah. Who, his rubric for, you know, a good town meeting is 1, open, 2, fair, and 3, efficient. I think that's very succinct. I like that. It leaves out a lot that we have above, but, you know, I think it's an interesting starting point as well. Let me go around, or at least open for discussion. Are there things here that we want to strike?
Well, I guess I'll start it off, because I thought we had these principles at the beginning,
Hmm.
but when you talk to, and I'm looking at.
we did kind of define like what we meant by efficient, inclusive, and
Responsive.
responsive.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Well, you're right, we were
We
talking
said
about.
inclusive, effective response, and I thought there was a fourth, but maybe it was those three.
Yeah, those three, yeah.
How are these related to that? Cause
I
I'm
think
sort of
they,
operating under the premise, those are
Yeah.
the three objectives we were trying to reach the whole year. It's just a
Yes,
question.
that's kind of what I was thinking was guiding our discussion about, like our scope and charge. And this is more like, you know, town meeting. Town meeting should be kind of these things, and one of the things that I heard that moderator say, and I was only on that meeting for a little bit, was, he didn't wanna sacrifice town meeting and for the sake of efficiency. Do you remember that comment or something like that?
yeah, I mean, if a meeting that is efficient without being open and fair is,
It's like a fail or something. I
Yeah.
can't remember how you said it.
actually, and I think, yeah. Actually, I think I got his quote wrong too.
But didn't he's the one who gets the meeting over with in one day, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, they have 30 articles, 4-hour meeting.
North Andover is twice the size of Concord. And he manages to get an open town meeting over in one day.
and he did also say something about representation and how, you know, which is interesting, but we'll have to kind of, I'll see if they can read the recording and come back, but. To your point, why I thought this was different is, it was like those, I think was like for the scope of the meeting, so we didn't kind of stray too far from, you know, things that were inclusive, efficient and responsive, but I don't think those words by themselves were intended to define town meeting, if that makes sense. Whereas I think we have an opportunity to say kind of, these are the fundamental things about town meeting that make it town meeting.
Current town meeting, and make it.
Or like what, I was looking at kind of like what we should preserve about town meeting, like, so maybe we can say. We don't need these aspects of town meeting, cause you know, we're into a, you know, new century and so forth and so on. But these are the core things that if we didn't have these core things, then we might as well not have town meeting, I guess was kind of what I was thinking was different about it.
What, I am on the same page with Parashar. I'm concerned that we are changing our charter. From, if we're not talking about the three things that were guiding us when we started, and now we're doing something different. It sounds like there's overlap, but we can still do this, but I think we need to fit it into the three things we said we were gonna do, we're gonna be guided by.
Well, so we took that, sorry, Bill, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, we took inclusive, effective and responsive as our mission statement, right? That all who want to attend can, that we make efficient use of people's time and so on. And so,
Well, I'm assuming it was a mission statement for how to improve town meeting,
Right.
yes,
right?
yes,
Not
operating with
operating,
the set of
but
goals,
improving town meeting.
yes.
That's why I'm kind of curious. So the word I don't see here is effective out of those three. The others are there, and then we're adding a bunch of stuff. And again,
Mhm.
look, I don't necessarily want to spend half hour
Yeah.
quibbling about this, but I'm just trying to understand. We started with these three. Why do we have to expand or further
Yeah,
get into it?
Or
that's
expand on those three through this. I don't know how you, but it's just a format thing, but maybe
Mhm.
you say, how was it gonna be efficient? How was it gonna be
Mhm.
responsive?
Well, I guess I view these as an elaboration of the mission statement that we voted on. And so I view these as an elaboration of that. We didn't talk
It
about,
should be explicit that that's what this is,
okay,
as
good.
opposed to a change.
And I would throw effective somewhere in there if you've got the other two. Just to tie it together maybe, because
Uh-huh,
otherwise do we just throw effective out the window?
good. Well, fair enough. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. So points well taken, thank you, guys. So that said, are there things here, wait a second, please. So that said, are there things here that anybody on the committee would like to strike?
I don't know what sustainable means.
That we don't burn people out, so that we don't burn people out, that the staff. Or the staff who operate, who organize, coordinate and deliver town meeting. We don't burn them out, as it were. We make a reasonable demand in their time, so to speak. Let me go online, please. Any comments online? in terms of things that you would strike? Seeing none, are there things, within the committee that we would add? Anything that's missing from this? We've talked about effective.
So I don't know, but I understand of the people, by the people, free speech, I mean, those three,
Yeah,
I mean. What does that mean?
well, of the people, it's in the handout, actually. By the people, that the voters make the decisions. And of the people in the sense that, you're right, I need to clarify that. But that the voters make the decisions is pretty key. Yeah.
Again, I was just, maybe when this is in a narrative form, it may be a little bit more clear,
Good,
And I
but.
wasn't sure,
Thinking a lot of this is what I'm suggesting.
good.
while we always want to be open to continuous improvement, I didn't like follow exactly sort of how that would be done or what we mean by that.
Right, so principles, right? So apple pie, as it were. Okay,
But presumably we're going to conclude our deliberations, likely at the end of the year, we'll have a report, we'll make recommendations. I don't know whether it will be in existence or what mechanism would be that we would
Continuous improvement.
recommend for continuous improvement after that. Other than obviously the moderator every year
right,
has the survey that people fill
Right.
out, both when they leave the meeting and they can do it online and
right.
then take those things into consideration.
We have those practices now, as
Exactly.
I know, as you well
Yeah.
know, right? I mean, our moderators over the past 30 years have been very good about looking for ways to improve meeting, of course.
Yeah,
There's an after meeting conversation between the moderator and the select board. We have had surveys. I hope that those continue. So
so we
those,
basically just continue what we've done in the past.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Or maybe, and in that, I kind of added, I got some feedback from the public, so I think I added that from a person, a citizen that I heard. And I wonder if, I think what that was intended to say is, let's never just say, well, we just have town meeting, because that's what we do. But we are not afraid to say, how can we improve it over time? Maybe that, I think, is the.
good. Thank you. David Allen, member of the public, please, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. What's in my mind is, in simple words, blunt, and I guess the fact is, I wish I've never gotten to the point where I would actually say it out loud. But maybe I'll only come here. I've been concerned, as we know, I have haunted you from the beginning. And over time, I've been more than concerned at the vast spread and familiarity with realities of what town meeting is. Some of you, of course, the moderator, of course, knows town meeting better than any of us. We have asked moderators sitting here and Keith and so forth. Other cases, I'll be blunt, not at all. I did what I could along the way to argue what I saw to be the essence of town meeting, and let me say the nice thing now. I've noticed that the committee has been very receptive and taken, not just from me, but from others, what the essence of town meeting is. I am more than heartened to see this, whatever the words are that you started with, whatever words the select board wrote down. Town meeting is a citizen legislature. Its essence is deliberation and then a vote affecting that. And anything that ignores that is shooting town meeting in the foot, and anything that supports that gets it to where it needs to go. And I am so pleased again to see this up here. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So we've gotten some critical feedback. Kristen, do what should we do next with, and just in terms of our conversation tonight? Do you wanna, we could go back and tweak it a bit? and
I
come
mean,
back and
if there's, as long as it's not off base and kind of capturing under the umbrella of, you know, the purpose, the legislature, the deliberation and the voting,
say- Mhm.
then that's fine. I just want to make sure kind of when we are talking about our recommendations, that they all kind of still fall within the essence of town meeting.
Okay. So I'll suggest that we'll work with this, and when we see a draft of the report, you'll see this language modified somewhat, also in type orbit with the inclusive and our mission statement. So, good, thank you. I'm gonna move forward then without any particular, yeah.
And before you do, leave the subject of guiding principles. When I saw this on the agenda, I wasn't sure what it was. So I thought this might be more recommendations on how to conduct town meeting. And so I have something I want to bring up about that, because a couple of weeks ago, we made the recommendation about using clickers, like when they should be used.
Mhm.
And then over the last 2 weeks, I've seen that what I think that vote mischaracterized, because it was a 5-3 vote.
Mhm.
And our original vote to recommend clickers was not a split vote, it was 8-1.
Yeah,
Was split.
sorry,
8-1.
David, please do not.
Forgive me, apologize.
8-1. I voted, I did not vote in favor of the specific recommendation to use clickers
Mhm.
the last meeting, not because I don't think clickers should be used.
Mhm.
And not because I don't think clickers should be used most of the time, I think they should. But I didn't think it was our prerogative and within our charter to
Mhm.
shove that down the moderator's throat. I thought it
Sure.
was the moderator's, it should be the moderator's discretion. But it has been characterized since then as a split vote. The committee is only 5-3 in favor of using clickers.
Mhm.
And I just don't think that's true. So I wonder whether we should either revisit that, or if necessary, I have another motion I could make that is more specific on clickers that I wouldn't be objecting to. So at least change it to 6-2, and I don't know, Kristen voted against it on
Are
principle.
you thinking
So-
like for the report?
No, for our motions.
We already took the vote.
I mean, cause it's,
No, we took
So-
a vote on your motion
Right.
to use clickers
Right.
and yours, but I was against that
Well, I
specific
understand.
motion. It
But
was, I was,
what was the 8-1 vote on?
So that was
just
the.
use.
it's now being played
Clickers can
as,
improve meetings.
been played in the press and at other meetings as a split vote.
So we have a spot to come back to deliberation tonight. Let's
Okay.
come back to that and make sure we address it. I think my only concern is that I don't wanna get in a situation where we talk about something that's not fairly represented on the agenda. So we'll make that judgment when we get to it.
All right, I thought that was within guiding
Okay,
principles,
yeah.
but
Good.
whatever you want to bring it up.
I guess where I would, you know, put that also is the writing of the report, right? Like, I think, you know, in the report, you would note that it was the, you know, the consensus that, you know, clicker should be used, right? Like, so that it's clear that the majority of the committee recommended this, and then there would be like, kind of, this was the reason considered not to, or something, so
But
it
yet-
comes out that way.
Yeah,
in the
I brought
report.
the article, in case you don't
Yeah.
remember it, but I brought the article from the bridge saying
Yeah.
in a split decision.
And is your concern that that's gonna affect like how people
Yes,
enjoy
because
the
since
use
this
of
meeting-
So, Phil, so let's discuss this when we come to it, because I'm with you. I think there may be other solutions
Yeah,
to get the word out sooner.
And I think it
I
is
don't think we should
consistent
wait.
with the idea that in addition to our deliberations in the room and what we put in the final words of the report
Yeah,
is the communication to the public as we go through month after month, and to the extent that it's being mischaracterized in
So-
the press, and something as important as this. I think we should be sure we get to that later tonight.
thank you. I mean, what I hear is Bill looking for a timely response from us, and so I recognize that.
because it's not just our final report, it's
Right.
what's being reported in the press as we lead up to the final report.
Gotcha.
And not just the press, it is in other public meetings, whether it's a select board meeting or committee chair breakfast. Right now, I think a lot of those bodies think we're split 5-3 on clickers. And so I think not, the public thinks that, and the select board thinks that, and the chair, the committee, other committee chairs think that. Because they didn't understand this vote was just on a specific recommendation, how to use clickers.
Good, moving forward, thank you. So hearings, Concord, you know, we have these fun hearings, and not every town does that. So the pre-town meeting hearings, I've been to a few, I've never really thought about them before. I think we within the room, you know a lot about them, Parashar, and Phil as well, and, you know, certainly Eric. This characterization by me, trying to capture what the purpose of the hearing is about, I'm not gonna read through it. But I think the thing that I take away is that there are multiple purposes for these hearings. One is, you know, again, to prevent surprises. From the board's and committee's perspective, to prevent surprises, and that could be any number of things. And as well to inform the public. So the public gets a chance to see what's going on, begin to understand it, ask questions about it. And, you know, from the moderator's perspective as well, you know, Carmen has talked about that by looking at the character discourse at the hearings, you begin to go, that's a hot button now, that's okay, that would be a hot button. So there's a lot going on, but I mean, in a way, in a real sort of pithy way, the hearings are about avoiding a protracted mess at meeting. So is this framing of hearings accurate enough? Eric, is this close enough? Is there more to them than that?
Well, I'm trying to scroll down here to see what the characterization is. I mean, you said not every town has it. No other town has 5 hearings, period. Most towns have 0. Some have 1. But we, like in the Mass Moderators Association, people would be amazed that there are 5 hearings. So we, as we think about how much we do, or how much more we ought to do, or things of that nature. It's worth keeping in mind the reality that we do as much or more than anybody else, and you're bumping up in part against citizen time interest. You mentioned you've been to a few. Most of the people in town have never been, because it's viewed as sort of down in the weeds, and so I think we have to be careful of not making some kind of a recommendation of much more elaborate things that will end up not really having participation.
How long have we gone on with 5 hearings?
I thought that was
Well,
3.
It was certainly 5 when I started, which was 15 years ago, and I'm pretty sure that Ned Perry, my predecessor, said it had been for most of his tenure, which was another 10 years before that. So I mean, we've done 5 for a long time.
I would reverse the characterization. I think first and foremost, the notion is to inform the public. The thought is that
Yes.
people would come out and listen and understand the issues and be prepared for it again. And yes, the rest of it for the boards, sure, figure out.
So you're saying that's how you would like to see the priorities?
Well, that's, I think, the way the boards, at least the FinCom has always viewed it that way.
I think it
And
is,
that is-
and secondly, for the public, taking a look at it, to make suggestions, to say you should change this, or you have overlooked that, and that's the kind of healthy dynamic that happens. in some areas.
Like,
What Eric just said is another bullet point.
uh,
That is, under inform the public, it is also to, polish or, sort of,
Improve.
revise and improve the presentations.
Presentation, yeah.
Because a lot of times they'll bring up something, and whether they bring up something that will be controversial, or just, you don't need to bring that up, or you need to add this.
right,
I mean, that's one of the most important things that happen is it gets much better, the presentation gets much better between the hearing and the town meeting.
good, thank you. I'd like to recognize Alice Kaufman, please, online.
Thanks. I just want us to remember, it wasn't very long ago that the public hearings were really not meant to be a public information session. It was really to review the language of the warrant and the paragraph that followed it. And it wasn't until the last several years that we really did look at, and both I think Eric and Carmen were, starting to change the way we view these public hearings. They weren't marketed as a communications tool to the public. They really were an internal working organization that anyone could come to because they were public hearings on these. But I think we're talking about, at this point, when we look at what this lays out in the slide, is a big change in how those what we expect out of the public hearings. And if that is in case what we want, which I think is where we're moving. I mean, I think Carmen has made a lot of changes that moved in that direction, so did Eric, that they are much more responsive and engaging with the community. Then I think we have a greater obligation to actually market and these public hearings, because most people don't look at public hearings as something that they want to go and see or go to. But if you remember that these really were structural in nature until the last maybe the last 5 years, where we started looking at making substantial changes to the language and the presentation so that the message of the warrant article is heard by a receptive public who may not be an insider. So that nature has changed.
Thank you, Alice. Keith Bergman, please.
Yeah, thanks. My view is that the improvement that we seek to make with the public hearing process is that first we're educating the public on the subject matter that's coming before town meeting. And secondly, we're providing an opportunity for them to give us input. And I haven't always felt that those two things were happening at all the public hearings that I attended. I tried to make a comment at a zoning, at a planning board hearing, and was told that it would be appropriate for that comment at town meeting, but not appropriate at the public hearing, which I found difficult to understand. So anyway, that's how I look at it. Thanks.
So Keith, I want to ask for one clarification, and I'm afraid that maybe I've confused things, but so we've got town meeting, walking it back, we've got, the 5 public hearings. Walking it back, we've got the board hearings. Given board in the plan, our committee, right? Well, trying to think of a good committee, the historical commission, right? And before they send off an article to get reviewed by, I'll say, the planning board in one of the 5 meetings, they would likely have a hearing on their work. And so,
Well, to be clear,
yeah,
they either have a meeting or a hearing, both of which are open to folks.
exactly,
Okay.
right, yeah, both of which, right?
Sometimes they don't do hearings, they just have meetings.
Right,
Okay.
right, but it's at the originating boards or committees, in their working process are gonna have a chance, or they're working in front of the public. They could, would expect to sort of vet whatever it is that's gonna go before the warrant. They're gonna vet that, and then, what we see at the select board or planning board hearing is a second pass at that, so to speak, with a different audience. So, and the approach that, I'm talking about the big 5 hearings, and what I believe perhaps the norms for that should be, or the practice for that should be. Are we on the same page, Keith?
Not 100%.
Yeah,
Somebody
I think perhaps so. I guess I'd make the distinction that there are some boards that in preparing their subject matter for town meeting do in
Right.
fact have public hearings. And one example I can think of is the Community Preservation Committee.
Perfect, yeah.
That they are definitely, they have a public hearing process that they use to review the applications that they have before them. They then produce their recommendations, and then it goes to a public hearing in front of the Finance Committee. But that doesn't necessarily, but that public hearing process doesn't necessarily happen at every board that's producing content. And I'm not advocating that they should, but certainly those meetings where boards are working on content are admittedly another opportunity for public input and public education.
Good. Thank you for your clarification. So 1 second, please. So, So I'd like for us to talk then about a recommended practice for conducting the big five hearings, or hearings that lead into an article for the warrant. This is what I put together. What do we think about that? Erica, go to your comment, please.
Well, I was right where you just pointed, and that is, as I reflect on what I'm hearing and Keith's experience and what Alice said. I'm realizing that there are 5 hearings. There are different chairs and different committees. And some have been very open, and I remember very well, committee, or one of the 5 hearings where people would get up and it would be back and forth and no, you haven't thought of this. And then other ones where the chair, as with Keith, would sort of say no.
Right.
And so I think it could be a very important recommendation of this committee that it be the standard that all 5 of the committees would, the hearings, the purpose would be, I think as Keith outlined it, 1, to inform the public, 2, though, to hear feedback and thoughts, other perspectives. And it shouldn't be an insider thing where you say, oh, if you disagree, bring that up at town meeting.
Right. Parashar, please.
So I think we need to do a reality check here on the recommended practices, because at least from my memory of the way the 3 hearings at the FinCom does.
Yeah.
We do most of these things, if not all of them. So there are decks, town manager and the school superintendent, everybody comes up and presents their warrant articles.
Yeah.
Justifies them, right? They've got the preliminary motion up there, I mean, we do all this. They're in the hearing packet, et cetera, so I would suggest sitting down with the folks in the town that run this for us.
Mhm.
Saying, hey, which of these are already being done? So we're not presenting this as new ideas, but at least acknowledging that most of it is.
I'm not calling it a new idea.
Okay, because when I see that- Okay, fair enough.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we just, I don't want
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
to think this is like,
yeah.
we're not doing most of this.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Good. Phil, 1 second, please. Yeah, go ahead, Phil, please.
So I just have a comment about this. I don't think we should have 8 points for recommended practices, just too detailed. And, you know, the more you add, I just know this from my experience in legal practice, the more you add, more detail you add, the more you're gonna have to change in the future. And, you know, who knows? Yes, we should have decks, but 2 years from now, something might invent something different from decks. Or somebody might have a good reason for not bringing a deck.
Mhm.
And so I think we should have much higher level principles, like they should be to inform the public. They should be to receive feedback from, for the boards to receive feedback from the public and some other high level thing, but not tell them decks, et cetera. Like, so maybe three guiding principles.
Thank you. Alice, I see your hand up. Thank you.
I did want to just say, I think that Phil may have said most of it, but this to me is procedural and belongs in the purview of the town moderator. What she wants and accept, or what the moderator would want and accept for town meeting presentation is not something that I think we should be getting into the details of. That's how you run a meeting, and that meets the legal requirements of what she needs to do. So I don't want to say how many decks or what the decks say or how many we should do. I think there are guidelines that she uses, and I think they probably are in town meeting time, but I'm not sure. That we don't need to specify it, and I wouldn't do that. I like the broad recommendations of who or why we have decks and who you're talking to, so you're aware of the purpose of the hearings.
Good, thank you. Kristen Haggerty and then Carmen, please.
Agreed. I think one of the bigger changes would be kind of setting expectations. Remember that oftentimes there are new members to the boards, to the planning boards and to the FinCom and things like that who are, presenting things. And if they haven't really been explained what the purpose of the hearing is, I'm thinking about like the first time that, we did our hearing and things. And if somebody said, it's okay, you don't have to get everything right. you know, it's really, this is gonna make things better when you do this, because what happens, you know, what happened to the planning board is like, you spend a lot of time, I'm sure all of them do, you spend a lot of time preparing your motion, like researching it, and then you get up there and people are like, well, that's not right, then you're like, really? So if we can reframe the expectation that it's really about making it, you know, the stronger case for town meeting, then it is a real help to get people to give input at that stage. So I would say that as being kind of the biggest recommendation, is that we're kind of helping boards and committees to better understand the opportunity of the hearing.
I think the boards and committees understand this, and again. Alright,
Let
this is
me-
all done, right? So,
let me go to Carmen, please. Carmen Reese, please.
I just wanted to clarify that the moderator doesn't have any authority over the hearings. The hearings are strictly in the purview of the committees who are holding the hearings. So the select board is in charge of what the format of its hearing is. The finance committee is in charge of its format, and the planning board is in charge of its format. So these recommendations that you make will be really for those boards and committees that are holding these hearings in terms of how their piece of the town meeting process ideally would be conducted from your point of view.
So Carmen, thank you. So we've had select board hearings for meeting in the town meeting that have not had presentations, is that right? And have not had Q and A?
It is what?
That have not had presentations.
Or Q and A,
Yeah.
Or-
Last year.
Yeah,
not had
yeah.
presentation.
And how did that work out?
Not great.
Uh-huh.
That's probably the exception rather than the norm, right?
I think that's right, yeah.
So,
Yes.
But for the reasons that you all discussed, like there wasn't quite an opportunity for some people to have feedback on the presentation that they were making. There was no dry run per se of their presentation. And also in terms of just getting materials out earlier and online sooner, that definitely didn't happen. And I was scrambling close to town meeting to get stuff online that I could have had online. And
has that happened in the past?
I mean, that's the only time since I've been here that
Right,
that's happened.
so let's not make a mountain out of a molehill.
You know,
One example.
So I disagree with you, and the reason I say that is because you know, it's obvious once you know, but until you know, it's not obvious. So I think, you know, if the recommendation concisely is to say, look, you know, these pre-meeting hearings have two objectives. One is to inform the public,
Yes,
and two, to vet the material from the perspective of these boards and committees.
yes,
And three, to provide an airing of any prospective issues. That's great.
yes,
That's great. I think we can get behind that.
yes.
Now, when I think about how to implement that, we can suggest some guidelines. You know, but that's not, and you know,
Again,
yeah,
I don't mind the age or whatever,
yeah.
but to acknowledge that this is routine practice.
Sure,
One
fair enough,
exception
yeah.
being, you know, notwithstanding the one exception, but this is relatively routine.
Good.
does it ever happen where somebody doesn't meet the deadline and so they don't get included in the? You know, so you meet the deadline for the warrant, right? We close the warrant, but is there anything where you say, you know, this just really isn't ready to go to press, and so you'll have to wait till next year? Cause it sounds like we do a lot to accommodate, and I don't know if that's the right thing or not, or even if it's worth discussing at this point.
At the hearings themselves, there's different degrees of polish. and
Right,
preparation.
yeah.
And sometimes the outcome of the hearing is a
Mm.
consensus to not, if the framing is not move the warrant article. It's like, now we're not ready for prime time,
But
they get off the
it's-
agenda, although.
It's always a
Formally on
last
the
minute
agenda.
scramble for these
You know,
hearings. So there's
Always.
nobody is saying, oh, your slides weren't in on time.
Okay.
And you know, I remember many finance committee hearings where we get a set of slides a week in advance when we ask for them. And then they show up at the meeting with a completely different set of slides. Why'd you do that? Oh, because I saw this person's slides.
Right.
So, you know, nobody sits there and saying, well, you can't use those because
Yeah.
they give them to us. I mean, that's just the way it is. It's always
And you
involved.
can't pull the finance committee, the articles that are coming before the finance committee, cause the operating expenses. and
Right, well, no, I guess I was
Right,
thinking
so-
more along the lines of,
The one that did get pulled at some point, and might have been before the hearing, was the whole restroom building last year.
yeah,
Right, I think that got pulled there, I don't think they actually
Fairly
discussed it
late.
at the public hearing,
Yeah.
even though there was an art, the warrant was already in.
So, we have an outline of the motion, which is the key points. Do we want to make a recommendation tonight on that? Or is it something that the committee doesn't need to really explicitly address? I'll go to David Allen, please.
Thank you, sir. I think it builds on Parashar's initial intervention about communicating with the public. A quite common complaint at town meeting is somebody comes to the mic and people groan, well, why did you bring this up? For goodness sake, there was a hearing and so forth. That's the negative, let's go to the positive. It's been said, and of course, you're now just focusing on these five and all precedent meetings and the committees that you covered, Eric. Crucial to incorporate here, town meeting is not an event later in the spring. Town meeting is a year-long event. It starts after the town meeting prior. Of course, public hasn't exactly gotten that way, but it kind of beside the point. Those are the facts. We look at how another legislature works, they're completely dependent upon what goes on in their committees. It's only that that's finally into the final legislation. So that, I'm hopeful that however we come out of it, it will be in that context of town meeting isn't year-long event. And what you laid out and what Parashar is pointing to about communicating with these specific areas gets emphasized.
Good.
Another thing,
Thank you. Thank you.
put out to the public.
Good, thank you. Eric Van Loon, please.
I'd like to recommend, picking up on what you just said, Mr. Chairman, that, to kind of pull together, the conversation and have a record in our minutes, that we would recommend that each of the 5 hearings would have the 3 elements of informing the public, second, receiving, feedback on the ideas, and then third, working to refine and hone and improve what eventually gets presented on the floor of town meeting.
I think we need a motion, I think we just written a report, seems like general consensus.
We seem to have consensus on this. Any objections to any reinterpretations of our consensus at this stage? Seeing none online, seeing none in the room.
the only thing I would say is your question was about, yes, agree with consensus and agree that I think it's just gonna be a recommendation.
Good, thank you.
You asked where citizens petitions go, I thought they
So-
were
so-
select board.
Separate set of questions
Okay.
following the hearings ones.
Oh.
So, a challenge, right, is how the big 5, so to speak, get publicized. I know that the town meeting page is a work in progress, but right now those hearings are buried in the calendar and probably want to have them on that page.
Yeah, they also, we do run legal ads for them in the Concord Bridge for people that do look at that, but, yeah, we'll get built on more.
Thank you.
They used to be in the paper that went out with the warrant. So
The day.
it might have even
Right
been
on the back,
on the cover
maybe.
back.
Yeah,
on the
that's
cover.
right.
Yeah,
And we're not having that this year, but in the past, it's been pretty well publicized, I think.
Well,
But if the bridge is gonna have, Carmen suggested earlier tonight, 8 pages instead of 4. Because of the length of the warrant, that's a great opportunity to have a big box as part of a warrant that says, here are the 5 dates and here's when each of these warrant articles will be
So,
And even
considered.
so do you think the hearing dates will be on the mailing?
Sorry,
Do you think the hearing dates will be in the mailing?
in the warrant, in the bridge.
Yeah,
If we have space, I think it's something we can definitely put in.
cool, good, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
can I ask another question? So
Yeah.
there's a lot of mailing lists that we have, right? School committees and,
Is it
Public
an
Works.
email or the physical mailing?
it's an email that comes, right? Cause I signed up for
Oh, yeah, the
construction.
news
and all that kind of-
announcements, yeah.
I don't know whether the public hearing notices or anything like that come through there?
You know, you might
That's
only
the
get it
question.
if you're signed up to get the agendas
Yeah.
for the
I
committee,
understand, but
yeah.
what I'm suggesting is maybe you send them out to everybody that signed up for any of those.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we do that actually, but I would say if we did it, it's probably significantly closer to, so people get the notification and then it's coming up and they don't forget about it.
Good, thank you. Ms. Wade, so, a different question, right, is, you know, unless the historical commission or some other board takes up a citizen's petition in a meeting, the only time that citizens petitions get airing, so to speak, is probably at the, you know, is at one of the big 5 hearings. I think that's interesting, right? They don't necessarily get the same degree of attention. So it's just it's an
Well,
observation.
what goes on at the select board's big 5 here?
They go through the.
But I see what you're saying,
Yeah,
whereas the
that's
other
it.
ones, they're discussed a lot in the meetings leading up to the hearing, you know, at the finance committee or the planning board or whatever, I see what you're saying, whereas a citizen petition is kind of working offline. And then, you know, it just gets the one presentation at the hearing.
Well, so to be fair,
Yeah,
folks are advised to go talk to the relevant committees
sure,
ahead of time, so A, there's no surprise, and B, the committee then has an opportunity to pick it up and make it their own.
yeah,
So again, it's a process through the course of the year,
yeah.
right? If the most citizen who shows up in December 31st with an idea,
It
that
is-
happens.
Right, it should be a process through the course of the year,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
Let me recognize Keith and then Carmen, please. Keith, please.
Yeah, I just want to follow up the suggestion that a best practice for a petitioner would be to appear before, as was just said, a committee that deals with the subject matter of that petition, which might be other than the 3 that are holding hearings per se, select board, planning board, and finance committee. Just for example, one of the voter petitioned articles is a proposed rezoning of land opposite the Newbury Court senior living facility. And so Newbury Court is reached out, and the housing groups, for example, have reached out to Newbury Court, and we're coordinating, you know, one or a series of meetings where we'll be meeting with that petitioner, discussing the article. They'd be looking for our support, and that's just a good business practice in leading up to town meeting, and something that any petitioner could follow. If the subject matter deals with a particular town board, they ought to be directed and encouraged to go and meet with the town boards that may want to be making recommendations on their article.
Good,
Thanks.
thank you, Keith. Carmen, please.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to make the same point, and I can tell you that it has been my practice, certainly since I have been moderator, to strongly urge every citizen petitioner to seek out whatever committee or board might be interested in the subject matter of their petition and get themselves on their agenda for a presentation. And you know, it's better for the petition, it's better for town meeting, it's better for the petitioner, and it gives the board or committee an opportunity to weigh in and to formulate a point of view.
Good, thank you.
So Eric, I just have one point.
Yeah.
I just hope that everybody understands, as far as I know, there's no magic about the word hearing. There are some committees that have to have hearings.
Yeah.
Like I know the Public Works Commission has to have a hearing on setting rates, a so-called hearing. But as Parashar said, meetings are hearings too.
Yeah.
Right, is it, Eric, do you think there's any legal difference between a hearing and a public meeting?
There, a hearing can be a more formal kind of.
Can be.
Can be, but it's
There's nothing magic.
Right, there are certainly regular committee meetings, which are in function are like a hearing. It's
I
like
think
discussion.
they mostly are, and,
Let me go direct to Carmen for the authority on that. Carmen, please.
Yeah, there is a distinction between hearings and public meetings in that at a hearing, the public has a right to speak. That's the point of a hearing. But at a public meeting, the public has no right to speak. It is in the discretion of the committee or board chair whether to take comment from the public. And it's also true that you know, there are certain boards and committees that are required by law to have hearings, and then there are various strictures that they really must follow in order to dot all their I's and cross all their T's on the procedure, opening the hearing, closing the hearing, swearing people who are witnesses and that sort of thing. But the ordinary board that doesn't have a statutory responsibility to have hearings that decides, for example, the agriculture committee is going to have a hearing on something, the right to farm bylaw that they plan to bring, and they call it a hearing, and the point is they invite a lot of people and tell them that they all have the right to speak, but they don't have any real formal rubric that they need to follow. But that's the real difference between a hearing and a public meeting.
Good, thank you. Before we move forward, yeah, David, did you have a comment? Okay, good. So, yeah, the final thing, you know, Parashar, I think I recall this from, you were talking about some of the work that you did at FinCom, how we did all this work to get word out, to organize stuff, and, you know, it wasn't great turnout, but I recognize the effort that goes into making things available to the public, and I'll say from my own personal experience, a disappointment. When nobody shows up.
The turnout varies on the issues, right?
Yeah.
So we got a good turnout.
Yeah,
The night we had the town and the school budgets,
yeah,
obvious reason, there was a big controversy last
Yeah.
year. They knew what we were gonna say, finance committee was gonna say. I
right,
think the second night of the finance committee hearing, the third night, it was relatively empty. So again, you know, it follows ATM practices. I mean,
yeah,
and we can communicate, we can get the word out, as I said, at the beginning of last year. Let's not say we're gonna get 15% turnout.
good, good, thank you. So moving on, to meeting experience.
I think Carmen has another point.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carmen, please.
Yeah, just one last point. A lot of people do watch the hearings after the fact as recordings on the website. And so it is an important piece. And I think the town or MMN probably knows how many hits they get for people coming to watch those hearings, but there are more than you might think. And it's one of the reasons that it's a great thing that we record those hearings and post them, and a reason to keep doing it.
Yeah,
The only other thing that I can think of in terms of a recommendation, which is a little bit out of our control, is what I keep thinking about, the Carlisle Mosquito, after each select board meeting and each school committee meeting, they have like 5 bullet points. So I think it keeps people regularly updated. And so, I know that we have, you know, good coverage in the bridge now, but I still think articles are a little long for people to read. So even kind of the shorts might, keep people kind of plugged in. And that way, when hearing comes, they, you know, people have kind of heard some things that are gonna appear on the hearing. That's out of our control in terms of, but that would be my recommendation to the bridge.
let's come back to that in April, because we'll have one meeting where we'll talk about some of that stuff, at least I'd like to. Cool, so thank you, and moving forward, so meeting experience, I think, so again, you know, the previous meeting had all these questions and thoughts up about, you know, how deliberation can work and meeting days and so on, and then I had a long conversation with Carmen, you know, talking about all those different points, and then I wrote that up, and that's in the packet, and my takeaway was that there, you know, and this perhaps, Phil, reflects the point that you made in our previous meeting, it's a limited scope for recommendations. So that said, I think there are a few things that I'd like for us to get into. And again, this slide, which wasn't in last week's packet, is stuff I've talked about before, about the trade-offs in terms of pace and sufficiency and so on. We did in the previous meeting, make a recommendation to the moderator to specially schedule highest interest articles in one session where practical. I think, Carmen, I think you had some question around is highest interest about impact, which I think from a town perspective, in terms of say the size of a budget or whatever, is one way to look at that. Engagement in terms of even if it's an advisory motion, we could see a lot of engagement that way. I think, the language I've heard recently was hot button issues. And so that high interest is both can be, impact and engagement or one or the other. Did you need more from us in terms of clarifying any of those ideas around high interest, Carmen?
No, that's great. I think that if it's the committee's view that both of those reasons, high engagement or high impact, are reasons to put something, to schedule something as a high interest article, that's just really helpful to know.
Good. Any dissent in the room, as it were, or online? Seeing none, moving forward. We don't need to get into why we wanted to do that, right? I think not. Okay, good.
And,
Good.
if we did, it was just because the purpose is gonna be heard and to share views.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, something we didn't talk about last meeting that I think is I believe is worth a discussion among our committee, is the question around reducing speaker time at microphones and also reconsidering the use of the pro-con question microphones. Eric, did you bring in pro-con or was that Ned or?
I certainly used it. I think that it was used some before. I
Yeah,
think it's an enormous aid, both to the moderator and to the audience, because
yeah,
or the participants at town meeting, the deliberation is not served. If you don't know what people there, it's all one long line,
mhm,
and you get 10 in a row on one side
mhm, mhm,
because they sprang to the microphones more quickly
right.
than the other side.
Right.
So I think it's really an important thing, and yes, theoretically, it means people are making up their mind, or at least some people are making up their mind earlier. But in fact, some people are coming to the meeting in order to be advocates,
Mhm.
and other people are sitting there waiting to be persuaded.
When you were moderating, Mark DeSalvo from North Andover talked about how his approach to high interest or hot button articles can be that he gets together with the pro side and the con side, as long as you can identify who the cons are, as it were, before meeting to determine an established set of facts, right? This is what we all understand to be the facts. And then at meeting, he'll begin by taking questions before there's any pro and con speech, beyond the presentation, before there's any pro and con speech, he'll basically look for questions to be answered first. And then after some period, we'll get into the pro and con speech. Is that a pattern that you practiced, or have you seen that?
I didn't practice it, I haven't seen it, and what I have seen in Concord
Yeah,
is that the questions microphone
yeah,
ends up becoming abused. It becomes a vehicle for people to get up, and usually it's cons, but I've got a question. Have you ever thought about, or what about this, or
Is it
whatever?
true that?
Yeah, right.
Right.
So,
I do think the pro-con was a recommendation of the report 30 years ago.
yeah, it may well have been, actually,
And
yeah.
so I think
Yes.
it has been around for a while, and I don't remember if it was saying we should continue doing pro and con, or we should institute pro and con, but I mean, it was at least that long ago.
I can also
good
tell
for
you
you, remember?
from trials,
Yeah,
in jury trials, judges always insist that the parties agree to a stipulated set of facts.
mhm,
and those are read to the jury, and the jury just goes to sleep during this.
Are you suggesting we all go to sleep during?
No, no, I'm just saying that, I actually am skeptical about how that would work in a town meeting. That is, they say, we're gonna read the stipulated facts,
Yeah.
and people go to sleep for the next.
But I want that, I want that recorded, because I'd love to watch that.
Yeah, interesting.
I think also the facts, a trial is a bunch of factual things, so much of policy is going in different directions and.
Yeah.
What I did used to do as a moderator was, look for, finding out where there's essentially, if there's an organized con.
Right.
There's always an organized pro, because that's the committee or the citizen
Right.
or whatever that's presenting. But if there's really a group and it's something of an organized group, which does happen,
Right.
especially some high interest articles, then making sure that, they're called on to make an initial, con presentation, not limited to the
Right.
1 or 2 minutes. And there's some controversy over this. There were a number of times when I said, yeah, it's an organized group, they can use the.
Yeah.
But that's sort of fine tuning aspect.
And, there we're back to the moderator's judgment. Right, yeah, and, who gets called, and what that microphone, moderator's judgment, no argument there. So we had one voter, who came to our meeting and talked about how she felt that, the pro and con microphones increased divisiveness. Is this a point that has resonance with our group?
I was at the hearing where that was said, and it did not have resonance with me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if we can go back to the fact that we are trying to persuade each other, but not out of, disrespect for somebody else's view. And so like if somehow we can kind of shift the culture to, yeah, it's okay to disagree. Then hopefully that makes it less, that it feels less divisive. Is the key.
Yeah, thank you. Keith Bergman, please.
Yeah, I just want to put in a my support for yes, no, and question microphones. And just by way of example, I've watched the control for our experiment, and I watch Nantucket Town meetings where they just have one microphone, and it's painful to listen to someone speak for a long time with a little anecdote, and they are withholding the basic information. Well, are you supporting the article, or are you opposed? And they'll tell you at the end, but it's a mystery novel, and I think that it's much better. Our system is much better where the moderator can judge. Are you hearing both sides of the argument? Because people are self-identifying. So that's a very helpful thing.
Good, thank you.
So I have a question, kind of a controversial thing. At town meeting, we're not allowed to clap and, boo or otherwise. However, we're talking about ways to reduce redundancy. Could we, and I'm thinking about like when you're online, let's say you give a thumbs up to something, somebody says something, and you see a thumbs up, and a lot of people are like, yeah, I agree with that. Could we, in the audience, you have somebody that is at the microphone and they say something and I agree with it. So rather than standing in line, I agree with that, I hold this up. So it's kind of like it saves me a trip up there. It shows that I was gonna say the same thing. Would that be considered clapping or booing? And well, I guess what I was trying to think about, like, would we have fewer people go up because I don't need to go repeat something because I've kind of said, this is my way of saying I agree.
So, thank you. So I asked a question to Carmen, and I think to my takeaway from that conversation was that we don't want to risk intimidating the political minority. Those are my words, but it's that, it's not a team sport, right? And so that the idea, again, in my interpretation, that the idea of being non-demonstrative, to other people's speech and meeting is so that if you are in a minority, you're not getting intimidated by the majority response. It's that basic. Yeah,
Can I ask you a
Carl.
question? Our kid said something that triggered. Do we actually, I can't remember, do we actually have the words pro and con on the mic, or do we have a yes, no?
We did pro and con last year.
Maybe we ought to think about a yes, no, because really it's a yes or no to the warrant. You may or may not be con on some of the ideas, so it just sounds a little nicer,
Less,
yes, no,
less adverse,
than
yes.
pro and con,
Interesting, yeah, interesting.
right? So,
Try that.
Or-
Yes, no on the water, well, it's a,
On the
it's
motion,
a-
yeah.
it's an
on the
interesting
motion,
nuance.
right? Well, but that's really what it is.
Yeah.
And pro and con sounds like you don't have, they're not downsides, you might be in
Right.
favor, right? So yes, no,
I'm pro school committee, but this is not,
right?
et cetera.
Yes, no on
Yeah, yes,
the words
and
of the, on the specific motion.
On motion,
Yes,
so then you line up that way.
Good,
Yeah.
nice, interesting idea, thank you.
Or not, there's no.
So one other thought then, is, you know, Eric, you've been advocating for less time to make your yes or no point, 1 minute. And you know, maybe it's just 1 minute to ask a question. How much time do you need to ask a question? I think, and talking with you and listening to you and also listening to me, 1 minute's not a lot of time, even for a very practical communicator. But you think that idea has some merit, so I want to ask this group, is 1 minute for a yes or no point, something that we think is gonna, accommodate, what our citizens bring to the mic?
Before it's trash, could I say a couple words in in support of my thinking?
Please.
You have 90 seconds. I'll give you 90
Or,
seconds.
or 60, yeah.
Only 1 minute.
No, so, if you know you've got 1 minute, people will plan and will
Right.
use their time. Second, if you listen to any newscast, NPR or whatever, they get a lot of complicated things across in 60 seconds or so. And third, for the vast majority, it's really, I'm speaking in favor or I'm speaking against. And you can tell within a minute. And last, point number 4, if the idea is to let as many people speak as possible, have as much back and forth, by the math, it's half the time, 1 minute versus 2.
Sure.
Good, to get the same, you know,
Thank
you
you.
get twice as many speakers.
Any other thoughts on this? Phil Swain, please?
I agree with Eric, and I want to remind people, there's a law, I think it's called,
Diminishing returns?
no, it might be Murphy's, but it's that,
Oh, the
a
time
task will
expands.
take a
Yes.
amount of time to allocate.
Yeah.
So we allocate 2 hours for our meeting and we take 2 hours. We could do what we're doing, frankly, in 1 hour. And people will take 2 minutes if they can. If everybody's given 2 minutes, they're gonna speak 2 minutes. And as Eric says, they'll plan if they know they have 1. So whether it's the Murphy principle or whatever, it should, we should, reduce the amount of time to the bare minimum.
So this would be implemented through a rule of the meeting, if I understand correctly?
I think it's up to the moderator.
I think, yeah, we shouldn't be telling the moderator.
That's what I was gonna say, I'm surprised that you.
No, I'm saying that it's the right thing, but I don't think we should be prescribing it.
Yeah.
I agree with Eric, the moderator should aim for a minute, but we're not gonna.
Well, I
Maybe
mean,
we give a principle, we give a principle for all moderators that they should minimize the amount of time for each presentation, but not specify exactly what that would be. And then sometimes the moderator's listening to somebody and said, in my judgment, I think you're gonna give you another minute. To, you know, or the person could say, I still have more, can I have another minute?
oh, that's
So-
really dangerous.
That's a slippery
Well,
slope.
I understand, but if you think in all good, the person actually has a good point, and they haven't been able to, or the meeting would benefit from having another minute, that's what I'm thinking.
So right now our meeting is 2 minutes, 2 for yes, 2 for pro, 2 for con, 2 for questions. So moderator can go, hey, I want it to be 1 minute for everything. That is a change, right? So you know, I think part of the moderator's thinking with the clickers, rule of the meeting is that let people get a chance to sort of endorse that change or approve that change. I mean, the moderator can just say, look, we're gonna do it this way, but, yeah, Carmen, please.
Yeah, so the amount of time to speak has really always been in the purview of the moderator in Concord. And that's something I feel pretty comfortable with. We use 2 minutes and we have from time to time reduced it to 1 minute. If we did during COVID, we reduced the time to 1 minute just in the interest of having fewer germs spewed around and less time sitting next to other people who might be sick. But we certainly can do that if we have a high interest article and we see that 50 people get up immediately and make long lines at the microphones. That's a great time to say, you know, on this one we're going to do 1 minute, and that otherwise 2 minutes is generally. You know, I hate to disagree with my my good friend and predecessor Eric Van Loon, but I think the 2 minute rule has generally been fine. That people sometimes have a lot to say and they're packing it in to the 2 minutes, and sometimes they don't have 2 minutes worth and they sit down after 1 minute, and it's fine. So, but this is not something I don't. This is an issue that's a real policy issue. This is a real meeting management issue that I don't think the whole meeting would need to weigh in on. I do feel that electronic voting is very different because it invokes the issues of, or evokes, I should say, the issues of privacy and publicly owning your vote and all these other policy questions that I know are very important to people in town. Privacy, very important to many people in town. So that's an issue that is worth a community discussion. Time, I don't think is.
Good.
So that being said, I
Thank you.
guess, I feel strongly that this is actually one of the more important recommendations that we can make, knowing that it's up to the moderator.
Mhm.
You know, what the biggest takeaway, like all these recommendations are from 30 years ago, like we're really not adding a lot of new things. And, you know, honestly, what we found is people do not want to spend 10 or 12 hours of their year at town meeting. And we, you know, acknowledging that it's a lot of work and it's messy and you really do have to spend a lot of hours of time going over this. This is a way to hear more people speak or to possibly cut meeting time down while still getting the value out of the deliberation. And I wonder if we did this, if people would find the experience more beneficial. That being said, I think they used to have at least 5 minutes per comment, you know, so we've really narrowed it down since then, and I'm cognizant also of that we want people to deliberate. I too think that you can make a more pointed, and just for myself, and less rambling if I know I have a tighter time limit.
So,
Carmen, question. So Carmen, the time that you allot to the various committees or the sponsors of the articles, that's also time management, is that correct?
It is, yes.
So one thought I have is, I always felt like the sponsors, we got 5 minutes or 6 minutes on a complex set of questions.
Yeah.
And going back to if folks are not really able to or unwilling to attend the hearings or through the whole process, to be able to take a year's worth of conversation back and forth and sort of factors that went into decision-making and boil it down to 5 minutes or 7 minutes, and Carmen, I know you gave us probably 8 minutes last year. It does a disservice, frankly, to the entire community. Cause you're rushing through it, you're not hitting the key points, cause frankly, you've got 8 minutes, so it's not always enough time. So if we're gonna make any recommendations around time, I would recommend that we urge the moderator to give the sponsors a bit more time capture the time by giving people 90 seconds or 2 minutes, whatever, but that's where I think we can actually benefit people. Or if they, in their seat in 12 minutes of listening for why one committee did this, would be much more helpful than 5 minutes and then letting people speak for 2 minutes.
So thank you.
Well,
So,
Parashar, I have to say the town manager agrees with you. And Kristen, your point's a really good one about having more people have the opportunity to speak, and I will give that some serious thought.
So I actually think this is all meeting management,
Yes.
not minutia, but it's within the purview of general meeting management. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the town meeting time manual says, talks about this already. But if we want to have a motion, rather than anything specific, including whether the town management or others should be given more time, is just, but I bet this is already in town meeting time, but that we recommend that the moderator minimize the amount of time allocated to speakers during the meeting.
I'm not sure about that, Phil. I think because the other force going that way is that we need sufficient time to deliberate effectively.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
minimize it, meaning, whatever he, she, or the next person, thinks is necessary to deliberate properly, but minimize it as opposed to, I think that's already in the principles of meeting management anyways, but if you want to say something, just keep in mind, you want to minimize it. Because we want to give more people a chance to speak and basically make the meeting more efficient.
I can suggest a different one, which is that the moderator target 1 minute for pro, counter, and question statements from the microphone. Target.
And
Not
Right,
sorry.
I would not adopt that. If I want to make a motion, if I want to move, it would not be something that specific.
Uh-huh.
Because I think we're nitpicking the moderator.
Mr. Chair. Sorry, Alice Kaufman, please.
So I just want to suggest that if we were to vote on anything, it would be, I think of what we're working on is our guardrails. So give the moderator the flexibility to make the decision on how to run the meeting, but put in place a couple of guardrails between 1 and 3 minutes. And let the moderator, so that says to the moderator, 1 minute would be okay. 3 minute might be at the top of the limit. You figure out based on the warrant article and the number of people you see standing, where you want to run this, 1 to 3. Does the idea of guardrails sit any better with anyone?
We're talking about, from my view, we're talking about a change in practice. And that the change in practice would be, consider reducing the amount of time that people get at the microphone. That's.
I wasn't saying reduce, I was saying minimize it. Sometimes that may still include 10 minutes for the town manager. Thank you. Or the head of the FinCom.
Okay, so I just would like to qualify or minimize. Eric, please.
The first, let's keep in mind, the fundamental here is we're just making recommendations. We all understand, ultimately, it's up to the moderator. Second, when we talk about efficiency and making the meeting more user-friendly and more people having part of our job is to have recommendations that come, as Kristen said, from what we heard. And things that would reduce the amount of time overall, that makes it more back and forth, and that eliminates or reduces this sense that, there's some people that get up and kind of wander in their thoughts. And it's certainly not been my experience that there are many people who get up and only have 1 minute's worth to say and sit down after 1 minute. It's more that they've got 1 minute to say, but they've got 2 minutes and they keep going.
So I'd like to come to closure on this.
I'd be curious if Chase has anything to say, because unfortunately Katie's not on tonight, but I would imagine there's a very different perspective from newer.
Good, so
newer
Chase, I'm gonna call on you. Do you have an opinion about the time at the microphone?
You're on mute.
Yeah, I'm with you. Sorry, my daughter's listening intently.
That's how it starts. Sure can.
I like the idea of starting with 2 minutes and giving the discretion to go down to one where I think it makes sense. I do think that 1 minute feels like a really fast time to try to get a point across. At the same time, if the decision point is everybody gets a minute or a bunch of people don't get to speak, then I think it's better that everybody just gets a minute. So
Good,
that would be
thank
my
you.
take.
Good, thank you. So in the course of deliberation, I saw this, I was watching one of the North Andover meetings last night or today or whatever. You know, it started out with 2 minutes and then, you know, at some point after about 45 minutes of deliberation, said, okay, 1 minute now, for stuff. So the moderator on the fly can just turn the knob. So you gotta come back to, you know, sort of, I think, Phil, what you might say the obvious point is, you know, minimize the time in front of the microphone. You know, Eric, I think, I hear you going, make it 1 minute, let's make 1 minute a target.
As a recommendation. as a target.
I hear Carmen, I think, saying, you know, I get it, we don't really need a recommendation, and let's go on to other stuff. Where do we land in the motion? David?
Thank you.
David Allen, member of the public?
Words for a motion, maximize voter participation, which actually sounds a little better too. But what I want to notice is an interesting idea, it seems to me, to have come together out of the discussion. This is always a great thing about discussion. If your target is 2 minutes, the moderator could say in advance, if your point in standing up is just to say, I'm for this, please just stand up and say that. We've got 2 minutes, but if that's all you're going to say, and you could move right quickly through AQ and this obviously is only something the moderator would decide to do, but it's intriguing possibility, it seems to me, come out of it. Leave folks 2 minutes when they need it, but cue them, hey, if you're just pro, please stand up and say so. Let's move on.
Good, so thank you.
Hold on, I just want one quick response to that.
Yeah.
Carmen and Eric did that all the time. And people would still, I got 2 minutes, I'm gonna talk, even though I'm gonna say the exact same thing. I'm gonna say.
I don't agree with you, Phil, I'm sorry, I did not see that regularly.
Well, I think we have consensus that shorter is better, right? We have consensus that, you know, the moderator obviously holds the discretion here. And the moderator has heard our discussion about, you know, maybe 1 minute's not so bad. But we also see where it might not be so good. But just focusing on shorter is better. We have consensus on that. Do you need a motion beyond that?
Related to that, and kind of keeping in mind the maximizing voter participation. One of the things that we also had kicked around was, if we could have other people speak who hadn't speak before repeat speakers speak, and again, totally up to the moderator's discretion.
Right,
But I wonder if that's related to what we're trying to say, we're trying to hear more voices.
right.
And so that's part of the reason for recommending you know, maximizing voter participation and minimizing, you know, extra time at the mic and things like that. Do you see that those are related in terms of, and I don't know how easy or hard that would be to do, is that you sit down, we've already heard you twice.
I think Carmen does that on the same warrant article.
Yeah.
On the
So-
same warrant article,
Yes.
and I guess I'm thinking,
Well, there are people that come up for every
Everyone.
single, that's a little harder, in my opinion.
I
to try to
agree.
list. I don't think we should.
Well,
increase that.
Yeah, no,
Oh,
you
interesting.
did that, right? Last time meeting, I think I saw you up with the mic a few times.
Yeah,
but we,
But I had not put the
No,
argument.
no, some people know a lot, they have a lot to say, right? You know, so, yeah, we'll go with that, you know?
and I feel like it changes, like, you know, I see the same people for like the first 3 or 4 years, then it's like another group for the next, you know, it's, but what were you gonna add about that? Do you think that's a?
Well, I think first, you're absolutely right.
But is it possible?
That maximizing participation is consistent with saying to somebody, you have had an opportunity to speak, and let's hear for some other voices beforehand. Second, the clerk is right at the moderator's elbow, getting down the name and address every single person that speaks on every, you know, and so there's a ready
Right.
sort of data point, and so it's easy for the moderator to say, no, we're gonna pass over and
Right.
hear from somebody else.
So none of this is a new, to echo something you said earlier, none of this is a new idea, right? Moderators doing this stuff already. And, you know, so we recognize the moderator's practice and judgment in the course of meeting. We would like, you know, to see, you know, as many different people speaking at meeting as possible, subject to, you know, all of that. And we believe that in a shorter time at the microphone is better, you know, subject to some people have more to say, some topics are more complicated. I think the presentation from a sponsor or from a recognized opponent is a bit different. You know, there the moderator has a coordination meeting where, you know, they allocate, they budget time, you know that, they budget time to present. So there is flexibility there, but in general, for the public, you know, shorter is better.
But I guess what I would
Yeah.
like to do is, maybe we encourage the moderator that shorter is better, encourage, right, because she does that as much as possible, right? But I would also ask us to encourage the moderator to give the sponsors a bit more time. Especially for the more complex articles.
Cause that's like more efficient in the long run.
Well, yeah, and people will understand what they're voting on too, because that's the only time they hear about it.
So.
Here's the headline.
The flip side of that is, and I used to always have conversations with the presenters, and you think about your role.
Yeah.
And recent town meetings, the mover gets called up again and again to respond to questions. You're back many times, the presenter is back, to the mic a number of times. And in fact, in order to, there's a combination of the spontaneity of the meeting that comes about, responsiveness to specific order of questions, whereas if you give somebody an extra 4 minutes to say in advance the answers to all the questions that people might think of,
Yeah, no,
you know,
no,
it doesn't,
I agree
it
there.
doesn't really pass through.
Completely agree. My point is, even in the allotted time, there are points that are left on the floor that would have been better served, and then many times you don't get the questions to answer those points, that's all. But I wouldn't want to answer all.
So just think about the headline in the bridge. Committee recommends more time for sponsors.
Yes,
Okay, that's
Yeah.
it, and it'll be a split vote, because I'm not gonna vote. But just, what sort of level of detail do we wanna get into here?
I'm not saying 3 minutes, 4 minutes. My only point is, on the one hand, we wanted to encourage deliberation, right? We want more participation, and I think it's a matter of balance. So give the moderator, just encourage the moderator to limit the discussion when it gets repetitive at the microphone, et cetera. But at the same time, encourage the moderator for high impact, high interest articles to give the sponsors a bit more time. So that's what I'm just trying to get at. I don't think we need a motion on it, but in the report mention this. That's all.
And so related to that, I think, remember COVID, when we were out on the football field, there were no presentations, right? And everybody had to look ahead of time. We talk about kind of informing people, we talk about the, year-long process. Ideally, wouldn't that be great if people showed up with some of that background so that you are just kind of recapping? We know that's not the case, but what's the happy medium between helping people to kind of show up more prepared? Such that the meeting time is as minimal as possible.
And with Keith's supercharged briefing book, that's the all-in-one, I mean, there really should be
And I'm
a
thinking,
better understanding.
yeah, you can watch the hearing, but we could also, you could take the presentation, well. What's the likelihood that we could, after the hearing and the presentation's all cleaned up, that you could the sponsor could do a practice run and put it online?
They could do that.
And
That's a
maybe,
great idea.
and so then we have them ahead of time, but instead of being a meeting where you have to kind of wade through, it's, 10 minutes or 12 minutes.
Right.
And it's, I don't know that we'd have it for 60, but Minuteman Media has been extremely, proactive in terms of trying to, do education. and then, you know, we use the social media to maybe do snippets of it or something like that.
So let's walk it back for a second. So we have these 5 hearings, right, leading into town meeting. And those hearings, we emphasize are for informing the public and for hearing feedback from the public about the matter, as it were. Those hearings are dress rehearsals for town meeting. And, you know, if I think at the hearing, I need 10 minutes, you know, I'll talk to the committee chair and go, look, this is a 10-minute presentation. And we'll talk about it. And I'll go, okay, fine, you know, or whatever. So you have a chance at the hearings to talk more at length. And I'll also tell you sort of, you know, where you really need to focus. I think, you know, the idea that as a committee, we could do a video and, you know, also try to put that up on the committee page and link it to the article page on the, you know, the briefing book. Yeah, that's great. You know, I mean, you know, there's production overhead, right? You know, you need to do the video, post it, get it vetted or whatever, and the Minuteman needs to, you know, so it's not like you can I can't just like do a thing with my phone and then go stick it up on the town website, right?
Yeah.
But that's, no, really, yeah.
Well, I mean.
So, yeah,
But I'm
Yeah.
thinking you wanna do that anyway, because then you know, you get the feedback from the hearing, you practice, but you give yourself a little more time. You know, it's online, somebody's narrating it just like they
Yeah.
would be there. So it seems like fairly minimal production, but yes,
Yeah.
particularly if we're talking about, we're not gonna talk about all 60, because there will be
Right.
60 presentations. But, you know, it's an idea.
it's the initiative of the sponsor, I would say. Let me go to Alice, please. Thank you. You're on mute, Alice. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
There you are.
I just wanted to weigh in on the use of video. It is done in other communities as part of town meeting to have the petitioners post a 2-minute video, not as part of the entire hearing, not as part of a bigger meeting. So you can go in and just click on, you know, Keith's housing, you know, video, because he's going to present at town meeting, or you can click on, you know, the 2-minute version from Parshar talking about town finances. So it becomes something that you can do with your iPhone. You don't have to go to Minuteman Media, and you can post a pretty good video once you've practiced your presentation and it's ready to go online. It's short and people can watch just what they're interested in.
Yeah, good. So, I feel like we've spent a chunk of time on this now. I feel like we have consensus around, you know, finding ways to get more people involved, different people involved, you know, at the microphone. How to keep.
I don't think that's the intent.
Well, it's gonna keep going, right?
Okay,
You know, how do we get people to spend, how can we get a given individual to spend less time at the microphone? How can we give presenters more flexibility to deliver the context that helps us get a better deliberation? Those are the things that we've talked about. Do we need a motion or are we good?
I wanna add a point, which is I don't think that we should encourage the moderator to encourage speakers to be brief or to sit down if their point has been made. And I say that because that's just a complete fiction. I did it for years, Carmen's done it for years, Ned did it before, and no one should be under any illusion that the moderator urging that is gonna bring about any change
Yeah,
in behavior.
I think that's.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
decades of experience.
I think it helps to remind people, yes, they ignore it. But it helps to remind them, and
No,
after,
that just uses up extra time.
but
All right,
the moderator
guys.
also,
Yeah.
and I do have just one thing I disagree with, Eric. I don't think we want to encourage more people to speak at microphones. Because a lot of times, they all say the same thing, so we don't wanna make it easier for more people to get up there and say the same thing. I think we just wanna shorten things or minimize the time, that's, but, you know, it's not necessarily great to have 27 people get up there and say the same thing.
Good.
It's not more people, it's just minimize the amount of time, minimize repetition.
There is an overall framework that I think maybe you're heading toward. And that is, if we recommended, for example, that as a standard, after 20 minutes of deliberation, the moderator asked, how many people have made up their minds?
Yeah.
That is a different way of coming at the 1 minute versus.
So it's a straw poll is a practice already then, right? I mean.
Yes, but
It's
not usually.
always available, but it's not used regularly. I
Sure.
mean, if we think it makes sense and it would help to move the meeting along and people's. I think there's a different perception if you talk for 20 minutes and the moderator said, how many people have not made up their mind? And a lot of people
Yeah,
say, I'm still on the fence.
so we favor a brisk meeting, all right? We
Yes.
also favor a well-informed meeting. And we also believe in adequate or sufficient deliberation. So there's three things we believe in, and there's some juggling involved, and that juggling happens in the moment by the moderator.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of what we're also pushing for,
Uh-huh.
and it goes back to Keith's fundamental, the comprehensive briefing book
Uh-huh.
and the videos in advance and the other things that the people, the deliberation is not everybody coming to town meeting from square one, knowing nothing about anything.
Right,
We
right.
really wanna push in every way that we can to make it not only a year-long process for the people that are developing things,
Right.
but for citizens to come up to
Good.
speed.
And
Um,
in theory, that would save them time during the meeting, right? And so, I mean, that's the value proposition.
Right, the work I do on my own whenever, when I have time for it, 2 weeks before meeting saves. The work that we all do saves us all a lot of time in meeting, doesn't work. So, okay, so I'm gonna move on. I think this has been a very good discussion. I think, the reading of the room seems like we're pretty clear. So I think we've accomplished that, and I don't think we need a vote on something.
No, and Phil, to
Yeah.
kind of to your point, I think all of these things are, we're trying to capture recommendations, and that's all they are. And the moderator can do whatever they want, but I mean, I think we're just trying to say, this is what we grappled with. And, these are some things that that's why we're a committee.
But these are also all tools that the moderator has, and it's all in the town meeting time and the rules of parliament
You
procedure.
know, a bunch
So
of
we're
this
saying
stuff, I just do have to correct you. Town meeting time doesn't deal with any of
1
this,
minute.
like 1 minute, 2 minutes.
Oh, no, I
any of that
understand,
kind of stuff.
But
At all.
the tools that we're talking about, avoid repetition, move the meeting along as quickly as possible, swiftness, whatever, that's all in there. And all we're saying is, it's not?
Town
So,
meeting time
guys,
is a specialized
Yeah.
Robert's Rules of Order.
So we have
Much more than
I'm-
these kinds
I'm
of.
gonna move this along because we're limited time, and I feel like we were right there. So, in terms of speaker norms, there's really nothing that I feel that we can do. We can drop a hint, but there's really nothing, because we're really dealing with, the moderator regulates speaking, who gets to speak when, but speech is up to us. It's First Amendment speech essentially. And so the speaker norms, I really don't know what to say about that. And so I feel like maybe we just move on from that.
Short, simple.
Keep it short and simple, Eric. So,
No, that should be the speaker note.
yeah, short and simple and concrete,
So before we leave the deliberation topic,
yeah,
I did have this issue I wanted to bring up about the so-called split vote about clickers, because it's been
yes.
mischaracterized.
Yeah.
So if, whether it's today or some other time, if we can, I would like to either clarify, change my vote, or ideally modify the text of the motion so that I could join at least.
Can I
Phil,
make a suggestion?
hang on a second. How about we draft a short letter for the bridge?
There you go.
Here.
That's what I-
And share that with the committee?
Yeah.
And we sign off on that and send it in.
Exactly, that's exactly where I was gonna go.
Well, I think we could do better, because I think we have a consensus. It wasn't a split vote in favor of clickers. We were in favor of clickers. It was just, at least I voted against it because I didn't want to shove it down the moderator's throat. I know, Chris, maybe you had a more general reason to vote against it, and I think Alice voted against it, and I'm not sure, but I thought Alice was pretty much the same reason as me. That is, I don't think we should specify
But
the moderator. So if we change this a little bit, we could get, it would be 8-1 again. which is the waiver, 7-1.
So, okay, so two thoughts then. Run is that we're not gonna figure that language out on the fly. I think if you wanna propose a different motion, write it out, email it.
I would propose a different motion and or a revision to the current motion.
I just could do it on the fly, that the overwhelming consensus of this committee throughout our deliberations has been in favor of electronic voting.
Okay, I wanna see you read a motion.
But we had that one,
We had that,
right?
I
and
wanna
it is the overwhelming
No,
consensus.
sorry,
8-1 is,
hang on a second. I wanna read what Phil has in mind. That's what I want, right? You know, you
but
wanna,
that means 2 more weeks, Eric, of ambiguity in what gets represented in the press or at other meetings.
So
And things, and there is a pretty simple fix here.
I can give them language now, with the help of Shannon could bring up Parashar's motion. Because I might be able to just amend it.
Yeah.
But I also could give just a new motion.
so wait a second though, we're gonna be at the select board meeting on the 3rd. So that's an opportunity with press coverage there to make a statement clarifying what
With
we.
the statement of one person, who gives a damn? And who's gonna read the letter in the bridge, buried among the other 16 letters for each, school committee candidate?
Can I ask you a question? Is Scott and Lindsay, who are they, is that Concord Bridge Journals?
No, that's Scott Gillis.
No, we don't have anybody here.
Okay.
It's not just the bridge, it's the way it's
No, I
been
understand.
characterized at other town boards.
Oh, maybe that's where Eric, so I think writing the letter now, having Eric as the chair send it in, number one. Number two, at the select board meeting,
Mhm.
take 5 minutes and tell the select board exactly it was 8-1. So no, should not be mischaracterizing it.
If this were earlier in the year, we happen to be in the 4 weeks leading up to the election. There's 2 pages of letters for all of the different candidates, for all of the everything. It won't get the same kind of
As a motion again?
attention or people.
If you say, like what you said, though.
So I have I would like to move to amend Parashar's motion from 2 weeks ago.
I am showing the right one.
Use cripplers routinely, okay, so,
Recommendation to the master.
so I would like to modify it as follows.
Excuse me, this is the one that was 5-3 or 5-4?
Yes.
This was 5-3, okay.
Yeah.
And which one was 7-1?
It was the original use.
Recommending-
Would be beneficial.
Moderators clickers. to-
Electronic voting.
Electronic voting.
No, I think it was clickers.
It was clickers, yeah, that's what it was, okay, so.
Okay, so, that here, I'm gonna, move to amend this. That we recommend, that to use clickers on all but routine, non-controversial matters where it would appear there is no substantial doubt as to the outcome.
More detailed than I would have expected you to say.
I understand. I don't like detail, but, that was why I voted against it originally. I didn't think we should be in this business. But now that the bridge has reported it this way, we might as well be specific so that at least I would do this, or even better, rather than, but let's just leave it, new recommendation. So just make this as an amendment to the.
So use
motion.
clickers in all but routine, non-controversial matters. What does that mean?
Okay, well, we know what routine means, right?
Right.
We must have, because we voted in favor of it in the last. use
No,
of the
the
routine.
last using routinely means boom, boom, boom.
Right,
This where you have to say routine, non-controversial. That's where the challenge is. That
But
opens it up to
routine,
discussion.
yes, I understand, I understand.
Phil, why don't you change your vote on the original?
so
I mean,
guys,
these are all recommendations.
That's what I was
it-
thinking.
Well, my original vote was only because I didn't think we should be, telling the moderator to use clickers routinely for votes on motions.
Right.
vote motions that were from articles in the warrant.
Yeah,
So
But
we
it's
don't
not
need to
just
use,
that.
we don't need to use clickers for call to question. The idea was that we'd use clickers for Article 28 and Article 7, right?
It might be controversial to use, to call the question.
Mhm.
So, I think it should be within the moderator to decide what's controversial or when there's substantial doubt as to the outcome.
Well, I
So,
think that goes back to the original thing, use electronic voting and then we never should
Right,
say anything else after that, I guess.
Because it takes it out of the hands of the judgment, like, who's to say it was a substantial doubt or not?
right, we have,
That's why we went just use them, things that are there,
right.
at least those of us that
Well,
voted.
anyways, I'm moving
Right
it,
that way.
I'm moving to amend, Parashar's motion to this language.
I will second it so it can be discussed.
I'll just tell you, I oppose this because of what we talked about last time. Who's to say what is a substantial doubt? What is non-controversial? And then you've got controversy because some people think the moderator used the judgment to tip the scale one way or the next. I think the moderator is in a better position if he or she can simply say, we're using it all the time. Here, yeah, the discretion's out of my hands. Nobody can argue. You've got recorded vote and you move on.
Okay, well, then we're stuck, though, the poor moderator is stuck on saying, okay, we're gonna have to vote on this. Simple routine matter, and so, yes, okay, get your clickers ready, 15 seconds, okay, here we go. And everybody's saying, okay, I'm leaving.
So town meeting 25, we do that, and everybody recognizes, you know, if all it needed to be was this, right? And so we all get that, right? And, you know, we also maybe have a case where actually we do have a count, and we save 20 minutes. So it's not like, you know, town meeting 25 is the only meeting we're ever gonna have. You know, we learn from the meeting and we can do things different in the following year. I think the idea is that, I believe that, you know, we use clickers for all the articles.
Yeah, except that,
And that way, you know, we don't have this burden of like, I'd like to have a private vote, you know, debate that, you know, I feel weird for asking for that. No, just use clickers for all the articles.
I
see how it
agree, that's
goes.
what we should do. That's what the moderator should do. That's what I hope the moderator should do.
Yeah,
Except we ought to give her the discretion to sometimes not use clickers because the matter is so.
well, routinely, right, routinely, you know, the word, in my view, routinely gives the moderator discretion to make exceptions.
And Alice had her
So does-
hand up,
So
but also like.
she has to still decide it's routine.
But it's still just a recommendation, I mean, ultimately, she can ignore our recommendation, right? I mean, like, so do
Yeah,
we,
I don't think she will, but
yeah, so I mean, I think what is important is kind of capturing why we're making a recommendation and what was discussed. Because she might make a decision this year and then next year, other, you know, moderators will come after it, and I think they might look at, you know, kind of our discussion and things like that, so I mean, I'm just curious about, you know, what the coverage in the bridge, how do you think it impacts kind of leading up to the meeting, like what could be corrected, because I mean, maybe the bridge person will
well, I
write
think,
another
I think a
article.
lot of people, including a lot of people on town boards and committees, think we're split on this clicker.
And I sense, so what does that mean? Does that mean that they don't want to use them or like?
Yeah, they think, oh, well, maybe we shouldn't use clickers. For one thing, they cost $15,000 or 18,000.
But I mean, I think they have a right to that understanding, regardless of what our vote was. if
But
it
our vote was
close or
8-1 to use clickers because we had 85% say they wanted to use them in the survey. So if now they think, oh, well, we're only, you know, we're almost split 50-50 on using clickers, maybe we shouldn't use
Now
clickers.
you've got hands up in line. It's a good discussion, and so I wanted to kind of hear what was behind your.
And I just will point out, these two things both have some judgment for the moderator.
Of course.
Whether the moderator is using it routinely, I'm using, what does she think, or the next person think is routinely? Or something that is routine, non-controversial matter. Both times, the moderator has judgment.
Good, thank you. Keith, please, and then Alice.
Yeah, two questions. First, what was the first vote that we took where we had an overwhelming majority of clickers? Because if the public doesn't know what that was and is instead referring to a something that was not as broad as our initial support, let's restate, and I'm not saying revote, but let's restate for the record now what our original vote was. Second
So,
question is, yeah, go
Sorry,
ahead.
give you the original, with respect to the use of handheld electronic voting at town meeting, the TMSC concludes that the use of clickers may improve the experience of town meeting and therefore recommends use of clickers. That was the 8-1.
Sounds pretty positive to me. Secondly, that if I saw the schedule in one of the slides earlier tonight, the select that the select board is voting on Monday night to make its recommendation on clickers?
I believe that what will happen on Monday night is they'll make a commitment or not to make a motion to use clickers at town meeting.
Right, so I would predict that'll be the lead in next week's newspaper, not anything that we say. And so
Exactly.
I think that as long as we are very clear from our initial vote that we recommend clickers. And if we can't reach agreement on the finer points of what that means.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, and who knows, maybe it'll be a split vote of the select board, and that'll be the lead story. But whatever happens at the select board level will dictate whether staff, I think, will dictate whether staff is going to busy itself to have clickers available. So
Well, they already have, so, yeah. Yeah,
Right.
good, thank you, Keith. Alice, please?
I just wanted to weigh in and just say, excuse me, we've already taken a vote that said we were supportive of the use of clickers at town meeting. That was vote number 1. That was some number of weeks ago, maybe even longer ago. The second vote was not on whether we're going to use clickers, but on how we were going to use clickers. We were split on the how, not the whether. So I think that's the only clarification that we need to make, because we already have a decision that the vote was nearly unanimous to use clickers at town meeting. And that's the big question, how they're going to be used. Some of us felt it should be left to the discretion of the moderator. Others felt it should be prescribed for every, to use it all the way through town meeting for every vote.
Thank you, Alice. If you look at that as a concise way and a clear way to explain our committee's position on both the first vote and the second vote, I expect that at the select board meeting, I'll have an opportunity to say that more or less verbatim. And maybe that's the best way to get our work back in the paper, as it were.
Yep.
Yes, David, please.
Thank you. There was discussion earlier about stipulating facts. It does matter to work, as we all know so well from reality. The facts are clear. Clickers used routinely will make town meeting longer. Not sure, longer.
Yeah, but you know what? We need to learn that. So in some cases, I'll make meetings short.
Derek, I'm not disputing that that might be so, and that you're gonna go forward with it. I don't want to interrupt you, let's go forward here, but I'm not disputing that. What I am hopeful is that we'll take on board, and then we'll get into the bridge among others, and I'll see to it that it gets in there among others. Using clickers will make town meeting longer. David Carr has gone out and watched numerous town meetings online now, folks who use clickers. They just take longer by a fair amount than holding up a back.
Good, thank you, that's understood, it's well understood.
Additional point, maybe it'll come to my mind.
Yeah, David, thank you, I'm gonna move on. We had a couple of other things tonight, but one other thing, which is a town meeting on Sundays. We don't have time to discuss it now. I think the challenge, and we can pick this up in a following meeting, if there's desire for it. The challenge is that in the survey, very negative on Sunday town meeting. You know, our moderators, this moderator's experience at town meeting, not been positive for Sunday town meetings. Carlisle's gonna try town meetings on Sundays this year, on a Sunday this year. I'd like to know if there's any other towns doing a town meeting on Sundays. I don't know if you.
Not the ones I've heard,
Yeah.
not the ones I've.
And so to come back to the proposition of town meeting on Sundays, what new information, what would we need to believe? And what new information would we take to make a play?
Can I just make a recommendation?
Yeah,
Given number one, number two,
yeah.
I don't know why we have to answer the last one.
The dream, right, is that, or the belief is that more families would be out for meeting on
But
Sundays.
they've already told us through the survey. So I guess, you know, we've got limited time between now and then.
Okay,
Let's just drop this idea and see whether we wanna compress 3 days into 2, et cetera, rather than try to shift to a Sunday. And we know Saturday doesn't work either because of athletics and
stuff, yeah,
temple, and they're just, I mean,
yeah,
I think it was just, there was an option that you could have a Sunday afternoon. You could get families there, you could get food trucks, it could be more of a community day. Get a lot done on Sunday afternoon and then carry over to Monday night, and there might be more participation and more community feel to it.
so with that.
It's my dream.
Wait, what?
It's my,
What?
it's my dream town meeting. The Sunday, like field day.
So let's.
Sunday field day.
Alright.
field day.
So, but that's not a town meeting though, right? So let's come back to a different meeting. I wanted to throw this out. You know, the question is, what do we think? What makes us believe that this will work? So.
Yeah.
Let's pick it up again. I'm gonna close our meeting now. It's after 9. We've gotten through everything. Really appreciate the discussion tonight. Thanks folks online as well. And with that, the time is 9:06 PM. And this meeting is closed. Thank you.